Sean here with BaseMint Comics. It's the weekend. The tea is ready. It's time for another Cornerbox Classics. It is the show on the channel where I reread all my comics as they were coming out, as if I had pedaled up to the shop on this particular week and picked up my comics like I've done my whole life. So that's where we're at. So right now, we are in the week of July 13th, 1982. This is an interesting one. First, the reason initially I was like, when I was reading all of this stuff, I was sort of doing it year by year. And what I mean is, like, I'd read a year of Spider-Man, a year of Fantastic Four, a year of Avengers, a year of Champions, Defenders, you know, Miss Marvel, whatever was coming out there, particularly just year by year. And every time I would hit the Defenders, I'd be like, gotta read Defenders. Because it's a quirky, weird title, but stacked up against the other stuff that was coming out of at the time, which is kind of like not like small doses, sure, but an entire solid 12-issue chunk of like, oh, the only thing I'm going to read other than new comics is Defenders, is blah. And so I just, you know, I was reminded of that as I read this issue. I did enjoy this issue, but this issue, let's get into it. Up first, that I would have picked up off the spinner rack on July 13th, 1982, is Defenders 112, Strange Visitor from Another Planet, written by J.M. DeMatteis, pencils by Don David Perlin, inks by Michael Gustovich, letters by Shelley Lefferman, colors by George Roussos, and a brilliant cover by Brent Eric Anderson. So, 60s, Avengers, Defenders War. I can't recall off the top of my head the exact issue that the Squadron Supreme were initially introduced, but I can tell you that it was confusing. I think they're introduced like as heroes, and then there's like another version of them that's introduced as, it turns out that they're the villains. And sort of here's what happened. Like, as I was reading these early issues of 60s Avengers, when the Squadron Supreme was introduced, being sort of like not familiar with them, but at the same time, in current continuity at that time, when I was reading those issues, Jason Aaron was writing Avengers, and he had done this whole sort of, I really liked his run. The things that I was following at the time weren't very kind to it, but I actually had a blast with his run of Avengers. But one of the things is there was like a big event, as they do these days, that involved like kind of like, you know, rewriting history, and some of the Squadron Supreme was like more the Avengers at that type. You know, only read through it once, so I don't have I'm kind of always looking forward to like rereading some of that stuff, not month to month, see how it flows, you know, now that I've got it all. But this is to say, like, that was going on at the same time that I was reading this. And that also sparked me, like, while I was doing my own little research on the Squadron Supreme, to kind of stumble upon quite a few videos and articles that were written about how that was Mark Gruenwald's, like, that Squadron Supreme 12-issue miniseries was, like, his favorite thing that he had ever written for Marvel. And I was like, dang, that's saying something considering how long his Captain America run was. So on and so forth, you know. I've got an affinity for Mark Gruenwald. He seemed, from the bullpen bulletin from my day, seemed like a pretty fun dude to work with, always acting out superheroics in the bullpen, so on and so forth. And so I was like, oh man, I'm gonna track this down. I will pull that series into Cornerbox Classics at some point, but I had read it, and like I said, I think I went a little too hard on the Squadron Supreme there for a few, because reading 3 different time periods of the Squadron Supreme kind of at the same time did me in the head when it comes to understanding the characters precisely. This is a I was like, man, I'm going to knock this one out tonight. Nope. I've already crashed the car and gone into some crazy Squadron Supreme rant. All this to set up the fact that, man, good issue, but this one, it opens up with the Defenders kind of like hanging out in their house. Beast has moved in. Vision and Scarlet Witch are there visiting. There's always good Gargoyle stuff in this. Gargoyle is like a character that I fell in love with the first time that I read this run of Defenders. I had initially pulled this into the large X-Men read that I was doing because I was kind of curious, like, Warren, Hank, and Bobby all leave the X-Men, obviously. And I was like, what were they doing? And that was how I, was like, oh, I gotta buy the Champions run. Good stuff. Particularly the Swarm issues. That was those 2 Swarm issues. And then I was like, oh, I gotta get Defenders. They're in this quite a bit. And so I have read through this stuff before, and Gargoyle was a highlight for me. It's got a mini-series coming up in a couple years in the Cornerbox Classics. I was all about it. It's definitely one of my favorite characters. So as they're all sort of hanging out in the house, having tea, doing whatever, they get an astral projected Doctor Strange who's like in another reality. And he's basically like, hey, the world needs you. And so they all of a sudden get zapped out of there, and they're in, this is like this really good, he's like, the Silver Surfer is there, and he's like, across the dimensions, does this threat to Earth originate from some other planet? And he's like, from some other plane. And he's like, you misunderstand, Norrin Rad. I mentioned a great danger to the world, but I did not say, what world? I don't know. I enjoyed that. So then they are obviously like, they stumble upon Nightwing, who is now in this plane, and it basically, you start getting a very solid, like if you needed a recap of all that insanity Squadron Supreme stuff that I said there, it is here. They explain the Serpent Crown, they explain the Overmind coming in and taking over the world, and your Squadron Supreme team there being basically under the control of Kyle Richmond and the Overmind. It gets, you're dealing with other planets or other worlds, and this one kind of being an existence where our heroes sort of don't exist. So all these characters realize that, like, the Overmind, not good. So it is quite the battle between the Squadron Supreme versus the Overmind. And Hyperion, like, he's the, I suppose, Superman character of the Squadron Supreme. And basically, like, after he goes after the Iron Man, he is then outed as a foreign spy. And, hilarity does not ensue. Things just get worse and worse and worse there. And that's when the Defenders are brought in, and you're kind of caught up to speed with, like, oh no, the Overmind has missiles on the moon. And so, like, as much as I'm like, oh man, sometimes Defenders, like, isn't the book that I thought it was going to be when I initially bought it. An issue like this where it's like, oh, you're on this other world. There's this whole other interesting super team that has been dealing with this, like, governmental threat because Kyle Richmond's the president, but he's controlled by the Overmind, and he's put missiles on the moon. Like, when an issue ends with missiles on the moon, I'm like, yeah, even if I wasn't on board, I'm back on board. So pretty fun issue of the Defenders. Like I said, I'm sort of looking forward to kind of revisiting all of this Squadron Supreme stuff again. I'm looking forward to reading the mini-series again for sure, because I was kind of trying to cram that in. I don't really like going to, like, Wikipedia. I'd rather, I got my official handbook of the Marvel Universes, and, I'll try to figure it out and find issues. And that's why editor's notes are important for people like me that are like, I'm not trusting the internet. He says on the internet. Up next, much more easy to understand. Fantastic Four number 247, This Land Is Mine. Written, drawn, inked by the great John Byrne. Letters by James Novak. Colors by Glennis Wein. And a cover of a ginormous Doom lording over the Fantastic Four in Latveria. Done by the great John Byrne. Look at that splash page where Doom's screaming, "This land is mine." He's not kidding. He's a big fan of Latveria. And then you get this double page spread of Latveria all jacked up. Mr. Fantastic's holding the thing back as Doom is lamenting the fact that Latveria's in ruins because he hasn't sat atop the throne. And so as he's giving this, like, you know, speech about how, like, hey, Latveria wouldn't be this messed up if I wasn't, you know, not in charge. This little kid runs into Doom. And the Fantastic Four think that he's gonna, you know, vaporize the kid. Kid's mom comes out. She's like, "Oh no." But she explains, like, "Oh, I thought you were one of, like, the new rulers. Like, didn't realize it was you, Lord Doom. They told us you were dead. They told us that the Fantastic Four had slain you in battle." And so then she's like, "Oh my God, you're back. Hooray," right? And the Fantastic Four is aghast at this because they're like, "Doom?" And, like, she sort of explains, like, Latveria was a happy place. Like, things were good. Like, things haven't been... And it's like, you know how it is with Doom. You know, she explains, like, the new ruler came in. They kind of give a recap of the Fantastic Four battle in number 200, where they thought that this was going to happen. And then the lady explains, like, you know, once Zorba was elected, after that, you know, the hoodlums started showing back up, shaking up businesses. Ladies were attacked walking home in the night. Businesses were robbed. And then they eventually, like, this is where it starts to get, like, you know, they put in martial law, and then they put these guardian robots out there that were going door to door and roughing people up and keeping people indoors. So she thought, like, oh, Kristoff was out running around, and she thought Doom was one of the guardian robots. And so as she's explaining all of this to the Fantastic Four, she gets blasted in the back and by one of the guardian robots, which look very Sentinel-y to me, but I'm all about it. I'm like, mention it to Hasbro that they should perhaps army build these so I can have these guardian robots and let my Dr. Doom tear them up. So then the guardian robots attack the Fantastic Four, and you're like, oh man, the Fantastic Four versus robots. I'm all in. It's pages upon pages of Ben Grimm clobbering. Johnny Storm is torching them. It's fantastic stuff. Drawn by John Byrne. Like, I mean, look at that. Ben Grimm just rolls up the pavement with the robots in there. It's fantastic stuff. So then, holy Moses. Hang on. Friggin' centipede out of the corner of my eye just scurried. So I had to guardian robot that thing to death. I was like, what is that? And then the thing was huge. Okay, so people start coming out after that point, and they think it's like a Doom bot. But then one of the guys is like, no, that's Doom. Look at how he stands, how regal he is, how handsome, or whatever you would say to not get vaporized by Dr. Doom. So then you realize that there's like a bit of a resistance going on against Zorba, and these people are part of it. And Zorba catches wind of this and isn't a big fan, so he unleashes, pushes at the push of a button. You had your guardian robots, right? Those were like the dudes that were going around making sure the streets were safe. Then he sends out the killer robots. And so now you've got a whole nother wave of robots. And once again, it's clobbering time. So you pedaling up to the shop on July 13th, 1982. We're like, maybe I'll get one for my 60 cents that I slapped down on the counter for this issue of the Fantastic Four. I might get one Ben Grimm Clobber in Time versus a robot. No, sir. Two Clobber in Times at different points in the issue as they start smashing through the killer robots. And it is glorious. And so then, as the Fantastic Four are dusting up with the killer robots, Doom sneaks off, goes after Zorba. And so the two of them are fighting in the castle. And Doom has him dangling over the castle by the throat. And Zorba's like, I'm king over all. My word is law. The throne mine by divine right. I am brother to Rodolfo and the only true heir to the monarchy. So long as I live, you have no claim to the crown. And Doom says, precisely. And drops him. You don't see it, but we all know it. And so then Doom catches up with the Fantastic Four and he's like, hey, I'm king. And then Reed's like, that means that Zorba's dead. And he's like, it's no concern of yours. I'm the king. Beat feet. Thanks for helping me this one time, but the next time I see you, I'm going to vaporize you. And that's the end of it. And it's like, yeah, okay. What more do you want for 60 cents? Doom teaming up with the Fantastic Four against Zorba, dropping people off of castle roofs. Not one, but two killer robot fights. That's a blast. You don't get that anymore. Next up, Iron Man number 163, Knights Errant, released July 13th, 1982, written by Denny O'Neil, pencils by Luke McDonnell, inks by Strom Mitchell, letters by Rick Parker, colors by Bob Sharon, and a cover of this chess dude by Jim Starlin. Last issue, everybody at Stark International got headphones, which I'm assuming is because I was reading this issue, because it opens up with someone setting fire to a portion of Stark International, and the dude clearly, like, when Tony gets in there, like, the guy still has the headphones on, and so Tony's like, give me those headphones. And I laughed because I was like, I'm curious, like, nowadays, if this issue was written today, and this is another one of those things where I look at, like, the grace that I give classic comics, because there's certain things that are done where it's like, if, I think there was something that happened in one of these issues, not sure which one now, that I'm sitting in front of all of them, but there was one where I was like, man, if this issue came out today, I would dunk on it. But I love it for the charm of that time period. And this is one of those exercises that kind of makes me, like, think about taking a slightly softer touch to newer stuff and recognizing that some of the references of today, if I was a less grumpy older fella, wouldn't bother me nearly as much as they sort of do now. So this headphone thing, like, I was sitting there reading it and I was like, this is such a weird, like, I mean, I get it. I get it. But I wondered if, I'm like, what, does Denny O'Neil have some problem with people wearing headphones? Like, I was legitimately like, if this issue was made today, it would have been phones. It would have been like, oh, everybody got, you know, like, they were all staring at this app, and they got this app, and the app turned them into idiots, and they set fire to Stark Internet. Like, that would be the story today. And so I was like, was there something going on with headphones in 1982 that I was unaware of because I was barely one? You know, like, could there be I'm curious what the real world parallel was. Like, was Denny O'Neil, like, riding the subway and I was like, I don't see how he would be irritated by people using headphones, like how we are now when people talk on the speakerphone, like everybody cares. You get what I'm saying. Anyways, I was just curious. I was like, I wonder if there was something going on where he was like, these damn kids and their headphones. And so he was like, I'm going to make it that the headphones control them because all these kids are idiots. That's where my head went. Anyways, again, this is why 17 of you tune in. So, the monorail lands on a car after Tony gets rid of that poor dude and his headphones. Monorail lands on this car. Tony helps the lady out and immediately starts hitting on her. Because he's Tony. You know, basically asks her out. He goes and visits her at the hospital. And she basically explains that she was like visiting, you know, and then Tony, you know, does what Tony does. And he basically he's like, I want 6 dozen roses delivered to Miss Indris Munji at the Stark Clinic 4 times a day until further notice, and he's like, and then send her a pound of caviar. And I was like, if I was a chick and I like the flower's nice and everything, but like, she's literally got like in the panels beforehand, they are literally discussing that she has like, they say my arm and a few ribs are broken and I have a mild concussion and some internal hemorrhaging. And he's like, send her a pound of caviar. Like, maybe she's not going to be eating, you know, whatever. It's just Tony swinging dicks. So then we cut to the dude who was controlling the chess pieces, the guy who instigated the whole headphone thing, and he sends the chessmen after them. And there's like an argument between the rook and the bishop. So clearly this guy has a stable of bad guys that are all based on chess pieces. Awesome. So Tony's flying around with Rhodey. They get attacked by this knight on a horse. And I did laugh because there was a point in the issue where Tony, I think I'm ahead of it, but at one point he's like, who are you? He's like, I fought in Dread Knights and I fought in Black Knights. Who are you? And this dude's like, I'm just the knight. I thought it was funny. So gets attacked, but eventually saves himself there. And when they land, to fix the plane that was initially attacked by the chessmen, Tony runs into another gal there, and her name's Janny. Here she is, okay? And he's like, oh, want to get breakfast while I'm in town? And Rhodey gives him the nudge, and he's like, as she walks away, and she's like, yeah, we'll get together for breakfast. He's like, I thought you were nuts about the lady in the hospital. And Stark looks at him and goes, Janny is one thing, Mr. Munji isn't. And Rhodey's like, what's that? And then he gives him this cheeky, she's here. Which, you know, typical Tony Stark. So back at it, Tony's, you know, he's having breakfast with Janny, but then gets a phone call from Miss Munji, who's thrilled about all the flowers, doesn't mention the caviar because she probably wasn't able to eat any of it. And that's when the chessman shows up at the hotel that they're at, threatens them. Tony's already gone. He starts getting attacked by this Timothy Lafferty dude, who is one of the people who I believe was working on the headphones. And that's when the chessman tracks Tony down to there. They fight. And Tony realizes, this is hilarious. Tony realizes that this dude has to he's like, every time that he attacks me, he's like this angle from me, and realizes that the dude needs his little chess piece knight thingy that he's riding, this thing, the horse, needs to rev up. And so Tony dodges out of the way, and the dude crashes into Thomas Lafferty's explosives and basically defeats this dude. And that's where it is. He beats up the chessman, but does not realize, he's like, but I'm not anywhere closer to finding out who is behind the chessman. And this, while a dumb, fun issue, was definitely one of those things that made me realize that Iron Man's stable of villains sometimes not perfect. The chessman. Marvel Team Up, number 122, A Simple Twist of Fate, released July 13th, 1982, written by J.M. DeMatteis, pencils by Kerry Gemmell, inks by Mike Esposito, letters by Diane Albers, colors by Bob Sharon, and a cover by a a pretty cool Man-Thing Spider-Man cover where Spider-Man is getting swallowed by Man-Thing by Ed Hannigan and Al Milgrom. I just, like, when I opened the splash page of Man-Thing walking through the swamp, I could, like, hear, I watch every night before Halloween. I listen to the War of the Worlds on record, Carved Pumpkins, and I watch Creature from the Black Lagoon. And, like, I could immediately hear, like, the Black Lagoon sounds, like, the sounds from that film as I was looking at this page of Man-Thing walking around. Then all of a sudden a portal opens up, because obviously this Florida Everglades swamp thing is the nexus of all realities. We're aware of that. I said swamp thing. That, you know what I meant. I meant, like, I wasn't saying Man-Thing is swamp thing. I was saying in this swamp thing. In this swamp. This dude shows up. And if you've been reading Defenders like I have, you recognize this dude because he was just recently fighting Devil Slayer and all that jazz in an issue of Defenders. And so when I got to this, I was like, damn it. I read one issue of Defenders already this week, and now you're hitting me with another. Boo! I thought I was reading a Marvel team-up. So this dude gives basically like the recap of everything that happened during all of that. And, you know, he basically, like, teams up with Man-Thing. All right, so we're at the Daily Bugle. Pete's giving Robbie Robertson some pictures of some old folks because he wants to do a piece on, like, the Elder because of everything going on with Aunt May and Nate Lubinsky, and they're putting together the house, you know, for a couple of them to get together. So we wanted to kind of spotlight some of the lonelier ones. And, you know, Jameson likes the idea, but he's basically like, this is a little bit of poetry. We need some news. And so Pete leaves the Bugle kind of upset, and he bumps into a kind of trench-coated Man-Thing and our other teleporting fella, our omnipotent dude from Defenders, and gives them directions at the Daily Bugle, but then notices that obviously one of them is made of muck because he has left a trail. So Pete goes after him. Turns out when he gets there that Jameson knows this fella. They go way back. And so Ian Fate, he's like the bright-eyed college kid who walked into my office 15 years ago begging me for a job. Son of a gun, I haven't seen you since. And that's when the dude's like, since Brian and Gloria's funeral. And he's like, it's all right, I can finally talk about it. And he's like, and I want you to meet my associate. Which is so weird. Because then, you know, Man-Thing sheds his disguise. And of course, you know, if you haven't heard, in Man-Thing comics, you are going to read the phrase, what is it? What the, you know, everything that knows fear burns at the touch of Man-Thing. That's dropped like 15 times. Clearly, there are some secretaries and some folks at the Daily Bugle that while they have been around some Spider-Man shenanigans all these years, pumpkin bombed to holy hell, you know, thrown off the building by Doc Ock's arms, suddenly having a 9-foot muck monster show up in the office tends to generate some apprehension, to say the least. So people go crazy. They're running from the muck monster, obviously. And, you know, Man-Thing starts going berserk because he can feel everybody's fear. So Fate stops time. Like, he basically freezes everybody in their tracks, except for Jameson. And so Spider-Man's outside. He can see this. And, like, Fate's like, I just want you as a newsman to go on there and tell everybody that they should be, like, kinder to each other. And, like, the mass media always seems to feed suffering instead of utilizing its power to liberate humanity. And so he's basically like, I would like to do this. But Jameson's like, man, we're not poets and dreamers. Like, we report the news. Like, I would be going against everything that I have in my journalistic integrity if I were to, like, pump sunshine and rainbows out there as, like, an idea of what we could be. He's like, I just got to report on what is. And so this obviously pisses him off. They start fighting, as you do, because you're midway through the issue. Somebody's got to get punched, right? Spider-Man comes, Jameson does his usual. And then, this dude's freaking out. And Man-Thing grabs him, so this dude starts to burn. Spider-Man knocks him out of the building. They land. Not good for Man-Thing as he, splooshes onto the ground, sort of pulls himself together, and Spider-Man's still going at him. And as this is going on, as this dust up between Man-Thing and Spider-Man is going on, Fate and Jameson are having a conversation, and he sees the pictures of the elderly folks that Pete wanted to do the piece on, and it kind of breaks Fate, where he's just like, we need to do something for these people. And he's like, we do, but not the way that you would like to, and so then that dude goes off to find Man-Thing. Man-Thing's getting shot at by the cops. Pete goes to town on him. I mean, we get a full web swing kick through his stomach as Pete is trying to stop him. And Man-Thing starts to basically disintegrate while all of this is happening. And Pete's like, whoa, I didn't want this to happen. And that's when Fate shows up and scoops up Man-Thing and is basically like, hey, if I teleport us back to the Everglades, because he's been away from there for too long, so he'll become himself again if I get back there. And so that is where it ends, is these two lost souls are back in the swamp. Hooray. Interesting. I always like Bugle-centric stuff. I like when Jameson is a bigger part of stories, but like the Fate thing's cool and all that, but like I said, I sort of when I saw that it was tying heavily into Defenders, I was like, duped. You thought that Fantastic Four was going to be my favorite of the week, and it was fantastic. But then I got Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man number 171, With This Gun, I Thee Kill, released July 13th, 1982, written by Bill Mantlo, penciled by the great Rick Leonardi, inks by Jim Mooney, letters by Joseph Rosen, and colors by Glennis Wein. Cover by John Romita Jr. and Frank Giacoia. When I saw the little kid holding the gun on the cover, I was like, oh man, this is going to be a heavy issue of Spider-Man. And not as heavy as I thought it was going to be, but it definitely is a difficult subject matter. So, opens up with some fellas busting into Moe's Groceries. Spider-Man's there. He shines, I love the old spider light. He shines the old spider light on him. And I was looking at my sister came over the other day, and she had the Hallmark keepsake ornament dream book thing, and they have this like a spider light ornament thing like that. I thought that was very cool. So Spider-Man goes to town on these two dudes that are fighting the grocery store, and he's basically got them tied up. Thwips one of the dudes, basically like disarms one of them, thwips the other dude's hand so it's kind of like closed on the gun. He can't do anything with it, and that's when Mo shows up, and he's in his bathrobe, nightgown. Do dudes wear nightgowns? I don't know. Well, I don't know what you would call that. I assume bathrobe. And he's got his, he's got his gun. And, he's basically like, you punks, you stinking punks. This is the 5th time I've been hit this month. And Spider-Man tries to stop him, but that dude shoots the kid. And so then Pete takes off with him and rushes him to the hospital. And then it cuts to the Bugle once again. A great setting for any Spider-Man story. And it's Robbie Robertson. This, like, Rick Leonardi. I love this, like, morose-looking Pete. Like, chair turned backwards, arms folded, like, head in there. Just, like, what he just witnessed is heavy. Lance Bannon's there. He's complimenting Pete on the picture, and they get into a Second Amendment conversation about, like Lance is a little bit for it. They kind of go back and forth. The store owner was defending his property. Are you saying that no one should be allowed to own handguns? And Robbie's like, no, I can condone ownership by the police, the military, and pistol clubs where the guns are never allowed to leave the property. But according to some statistics I've just read, handguns were responsible for over 25,000 fatalities in 1980. And it kind of like, it goes through like I think the thing that struck me with this issue is that the thing that I liked was the depth that the characters argued back and forth. And it wasn't like a over-the-top argument. And I feel like if this was done today, and obviously like this is subject matter that is just as pertinent today, and just as big of a problem here, if not bigger than it was then, I just liked the fact that the characters like had the conversation and it didn't felt organic to the story and not kind of like a forced issue that was brought in. This is something that Spider-Man would deal with. This is something that the Bugle would deal with in the reporting. And I just liked the way that it was presented between the characters. Like I loved that there's some really thoughtful conversations between Lance, Robbie, and Peter as they're having this conversation in the Bugle, trying to like make Pete feel better about what he just witnessed as a reporter. And so then one of the reporters runs out and he's like, we just got a tip that there's going to be an illegal shipment of Saturday night specials. And so Robbie like turns and he's like, Pete, I'm giving you this. You're the one that covered this already. You're going to be on this. And Lance Bannon's like, dude, he already bolted for the door. And obviously we know he bolted for the door because he's Spider-Man and he's a web swinging to go figure out what is going on. And one of the devices in this story that I enjoyed that put this above the rest of the books that I read this week was, as we're dealing with Spider-Man's inner monologue, there are these cutaways to other stories in the city of people being like this cutaway is a dad who shot his own son on accident because he thought he was being burgled because his kid was at college and he came home to visit him unannounced. So the kid just showed up in the middle of the night. Dude thought that he was getting burgled, so he winds up shooting his kid. Like, and that's all it is like this cutaway to this, like, hey, this is an accident that happened with this as Pete is trying to like track down these guns. As Pete like catches a guy, who basically like he does the old Pete dangle him with the webbing, tells him he's going to let him go, kind of drops him a little bit, but not just enough to figure out where the shipment's going to be near or where he could get more information about it. Dude sends him to Josie's bar. That's great. Like that. And then we cut to, and in the interim, someplace, somewhere, a handgun has claimed 2 more lives. Like, as this is going, as Pete is trying to, like, get more information on stopping the shipment of illegal drugs, we've now lost 2 more people to gun violence. Pete, obviously, tears through Josie's, looking for information on this. Josie laments that she needs to get a better class of clientele. And then as this dust up between these, Josie's patrons and Pete is happening, we get this panel here, which is just somewhere, someplace, the Bridewells are surprised by a burglar. They are defenseless. He is not. And it cuts back to now Pete has the information that he needs on where the shipment is. He finds it. He sees it going down. Cops show up. The bad guys with the illegal shipment of guns start shooting at the cops. They kill one of the cops, okay? Cops return fire. Everyone's fighting. A couple of the guys stumble upon Pete, think they have him dead to rights, and he throws an entire case of guns on them. And it was funny. It's not like there's brevity in this, But it was funny because the dude was like, that dude's skinny as a rail, and then he just chucks an entire case of guns at the guy and like flattens him, and I just thought that was funny because the dude was like, I don't know, you know, that was a tough one. I just thought that was funny. So then, obviously, Pete is continuing to like stop the truck of guns, and then we have another cutaway, which is this one sort of messed me up for my own personal reasons because I lost a friend when I was younger in a similar fashion. Dude was cleaning a gun and it accidentally went off, and so that was that sort of story. I thought the device of kind of showing as Pete's trying to stop this that like he's not going to be able to stop it all, but he's trying, you know. I really appreciated that device in this story, and like I said, I appreciated the depth of the conversation between the characters. So Pete does eventually stop the shipment, and basically, like, as they're arresting one of the guys, you know, he's like, oh, you're never going to see the outside of a jail cell again. You know, they give you life for killing a cop. And his partner's like, well, that doesn't help him. You know, he's got a, you know, and he's like, Pete's like, I'm really sorry about your partner. And the guy responds, that makes 6 of us, you, me, his widow, and the 3 kids. And that just, like, I was like, man. I love it when Spider-Man gets, like, I love the light. I think this era, this is, again, sort of like in today's day and age with modern books where it's a lot of, like, symbiotes and Spidey in space and all that type of stuff. And there is some of this in modern comics. During Dan Slott's run, there were actually quite a few, like, one-and-done issues drawn by Marcos Martin that were fantastic. These, like, there's one in particular where they were like interviewing people who had been saved by Spider-Man, and there were like 3 Spider-Man comics during the Dan Slott era that legit brought me to tears. They were so good. So I just, you know, this was one of those really good, like, street level Spider-Man stories, like dealing with him taking on, you know, the scum of the city and hitting a subject that needs to be discussed. So then cuts back to they're back at the Bugle looking at the pictures, and basically once again sort of like Jameson kind of comes out and is basically like, pictures are great, story's great, but the bum out of the story is that we don't have a solution. Like, we don't have an answer. And it just sort of ends with Jameson asking, what is the answer to this problem? And Pete kind of just looking forlorn and shocked by, you know, everything that he's seen. And again, like, it's one of those things where it's like, you could make the argument where it's like, well, you know, he sees dudes dressed up in goblin costumes and a giant rhino, you know, but I liked this, like, kind of slow, you know, just, I thought the device of showing the instances of violence that Pete couldn't stop while trying to stop a larger problem was very well done. I really like this issue. I love Rick Leonardi's pencils. I think he's great. And he's coming to Motor City in 2 or 3 weeks. And this wasn't on my list initially of things to have him sign, but I think it might be now. This was a really good issue. Heavy, but very good, which is great. I love it when that happens. So, those are the books I would have picked up July 13th, 1982. And, yeah, I thought they were all pretty good. I mean, you know, Marvel Team Up and Defenders were my least favorite, but Spectacular Spider-Man and Fantastic Four were definitely top tier for me. And Iron Man was fun. And the other 2, like I said, they were still fun. But, you know, it is what it is. New Comic Book Wednesday coming up. And then after that, there'll be another Corner Box Classics, and that'll be the, I think, last week of July. Daredevil, Dazzler, maybe a Marvel 2-in-1. Yeah, there's a Marvel 2-in-1 in there. There's something in there that I'm forgetting. And an Uncanny X-Men annual. But I know there's 5. Oh, Kazar. Daredevil. I lost it already. Daredevil, Dazzler, Kazar, Marvel 2-in-1, and an Uncanny X-Men annual. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. So thanks for having some tea with me and talking about classic comic books from 1982, and letting me murder a centipede. I'll be back on Wednesday with new comics. And then, like, comment. Let me know, what did you pick up? Were you as touched by Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 71 as I was? Or were you more moved by not 1, but 2 Robot Smashings by Ben Grimm? Let me know, how did 1982 treat you? And I will see you on Wednesday. Thanks for taking this ride with us. Bye.